Hello class, I'm Instructor Hollon, and this lecture continues our work with deontology, and we look at some criticisms of the theory, and specifically Kant's formulation of the theory. And we'll also look at another variation or version of the theory, a more current contemporary version of the theory. So the first section in the lecture then will focus on the criticisms, some criticisms with Kant's formulation of deontology. Note that Kant's version is what we would call an absolutist version of deontology. And the idea there is that Kant's moral principles are absolute or cannot be broken. So with that in mind, let's consider the first objection or issue with Kant's theory, and this problem pertains to the role of intentions. Kant's theory seems counterintuitive, says the objection, in some cases because of its absolutism. For more discussion of the criticism, see Demock and Fisher, 2017, page 43. So Kant could respond by questioning the reliability of intuitions in general, but this is a weak response and would undermine the use of intuition elsewhere. Since intuition has been developed in different fields of psychology in our modern era, it also has a fruitful field in logic through possible world semantics. So the problem there is that it doesn't look like Kant's principles will always apply in every context. So they're supposed to be absolute, unbreakable, if you will. But in some cases it seems like there can be what we call exceptions to a rule. So Kant's theory has seems just counterintuitive on the face of it because of that problem. So the response then was to say, well, our intuitions can be mistaken at times. Okay, that's fairly true, though. But it will be challenging to show why the intuition is mistaken when a principle is absolute. It's harder to be mistaken in applying a principle that is absolute because it would apply to all contexts. And also, the role of intuition, though questionable and controversial, it does have some fruitful yield in other areas in philosophy and in other areas as well, like mathematics. So that's one strategy, but it opens up that Kant can use to respond to the objection, but it opens up another can of worms, so to speak, with its own problems. So if Kant can find another way to respond to that problem, it'd probably be better for him. We'll see in the second part of the lecture how modern, more current deontologists can deal with the problem. Okay. Well, let's look at then the second objection. This one pertains to categorical imperatives and etiquette. Remember, we looked at the categorical imperative last week, and there were different formulations for the imperative, and this is the primary way that Kant uses to identify moral courses of action in contrast to other normative courses of action that you might think are simply practical and not necessarily a matter of morality. Okay. So Foote and others, Flipperfoot, have questioned whether reason is what always leads to categorical imperatives. So for more information about this specific objection, see Demock and Fisher, again, 2017, pages 43 to 44. So for instance, rules of etiquette appear moral but are encouraged more by cultural practice than moral reasoning. The challenge then is to explain why reason alone should be used rather than cultural conditioning or some other factors, at least in some cases, in this case, etiquette. right? So as a matter of some cultural conditioning, we may tip our servers, but is it really a matter of moral imperative that we always tip our servers, right? So what Foot and others are saying is that in some cases where someone might claim that some action is indeed a moral action, in some cases then it will seem more a matter of conditioning than morality. And by conditioning then less about reasoning through moral principles and just habit, enculturation. So let's look at the third objection for Kant's version of deontology, and this pertains to the domain of morality. Kant's theory restricts morality only to rational beings. Remember, his theory with the categorical imperatives focus on rational agents and usually have some kind of rational test or condition to determine if the action is moral or not. So the position excludes non-human animals then. And for more detail and explanation of this objection, see Dimmock and Fisher, 2017, page 44. So this objection even excludes other human beings who have not developed the ability to reason. The objection is that Kant's position excludes even other human beings who have not developed the ability to reason, such as, say, infants, babies, or through injury, people in comas. In both cases, we're talking about human beings who have lost the ability to reason or to think rationally about something. Now, because they've lost that ability, can we therefore exclude them from the domain of the moral community? That's the concern, because Kant's theory says that morality applies to rational agents, but in these cases we have people who don't qualify as rational agents in any normal sense of the phrase, yet who would clearly be included in the moral community. Kant's theory suggests they're not, though, because they've lost that ability. So there's a problem there. It will exclude people from the moral community whom we do not want to exclude, or who shouldn't be excluded. Okay. So then the challenge is that morality seems broader than reasons or ability to reason alone. So let's look at the fourth problem, and this is the problem of conflicting duties. Okay. Kant's theory does not help us decide what to do when two or more duties come into conflict. So moral dilemmas. For instance, when someone with an axe comes to your door asking for your friend or for the whereabouts of your friend or family, a family member, do you lie to protect your friend or family member, or tell the truth about where your friend or family member is, say in the next room? Kant argued that we should tell the truth, but this looks mistaken and is a noted weakness of his theory. For more discussion of this particular problem, see Krenak in Kantian Deontology, in the Matthews book, 2020, page 55, and Dimmock and Fisher, 2017, pages 42 to 43. So in addition to those objections, further concerns can be raised. Drawing from Feldman's supplemental reading this week, it is reasonable to expect a more detailed way to distinguish between hypothetical and categorical imperatives. Otherwise, people may confuse the two and lack the ability to distinguish moral duties from other normal statements. This is the difference between one should not murder and if one wants to stay dry in the rain, then one should wear a raincoat. In one case, you have a clear example of a moral issue, and in the other case, you just have a normative statement that doesn't involve a moral dimension. If you want to stay dry, wear a raincoat. That's not a moral matter, but there's an operative should in the statement, right? So how Kant's theory then will make it difficult to distinguish between those two because it's not detailed enough. Also, we can expect more detail regarding what it means to use or not use someone, and this pertains to his formula of humanity version of the categorical imperative: always treat people as ends in themselves and not as a mere means to an ends. Well, what does he mean by use and not use someone there? If we can never use people as a means to an end, what does this make of modeling in advertisement or hiring people to work on your home, etc.? So more explanation and detail is needed to exclude those types of cases then, because that's not exploitative or prejudicial. Those cases are not exploitative or prejudicial. So the subject knows they're being quote unquote objectified in order to present a commodity or paid for services rendered, etc. So it doesn't quite count as use in Kant's sense, but technically can be said to be use in some sense. So Kant should provide more detail there to help us distinguish between legitimate examples of use, again, amoral, neutral examples versus immoral examples. Okay, so let's, in this second part of the lecture, let's close with a consideration of a variation of deontology that has found more currency amongst philosophers and ethicists today. This theory focuses, this version of deontology is crafted by W.D. Ross, a famous philosopher. Ross stresses what he calls prima facie, or graded duties. And for information on Ross's version, see Dimmock and Fisher, 2017, pages 104 to 105. So what this does is allow him to handle the aforementioned problem Kant faces with moral dilemmas and conflicting duties. For Ross, some duties may be more or less obligatory than others. Thus, when confronted with a moral dilemma, we simply need to identify the duty that is more binding. So, in response to the axe murderer case, Kant says you should tell the truth. Tell the axe murderer where your friend or loved one, family member is. We think that's the wrong outcome because Ross says you have a conflicting duty to protect your family and loved ones from axe murderers. So in this case, Ross can say, well, the duty to protect the innocent loved one, a family member or friend, is stronger, more important than the duty to tell the lie generally, than to tell the truth generally. So Ross will say, well, we can tell which duty is more obligatory by intuition on reflection, and therefore follow that duty, uphold that duty, and resolve the dilemma. Kant could not resolve the dilemma because all duties are of equal weight and are absolute. So when two or more duties conflict, he couldn't use his theory conceptually to judge between them. Ross gives a version of deontology that can get out of that problem. Okay. So for more detail there on how Ross's view gets out of that problem, see Dimmock and Fisher, 2017, pages 105 to 106. Okay, well, in addition to the assigned textbook reading that I've cited, I've also included a variety of multimedia and articles that help explain some of the key concepts relating to critical evaluation of Kant's version of deontology. There's also a copy of the Feldman critical article evaluation of Kantian ethics as well in the module. I recommend using the multimedia and supplemental sources where you can to help familiarize yourselves with the concepts and issues. If you have any questions about critical responses to Kant's deontology, any of the arguments that I've mentioned, or Ross's prima facie version of deontology, please feel free to send me an email or chime in discussion forum or stop by virtual office hours on Zoom. I'm happy to explain anything further if possible. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.